The first thing we're going to work on is diaphragmatic breathing. And I know a lot of times people use belly breathing interchangeably with diaphragmatic breathing, but those two things are actually entirely different. So if we think about the purpose of breath, it's to get air into our lungs, right? To get us oxygen. So where are the lungs located? They're located in that rib cage. So how we optimize our breath is by expanding that rib cage so the lungs can then expand. And really the muscle that's mainly responsible for that change of pressure that happens that allows air to come in is your diaphragm, which is that muscle that runs under your rib cage. You have a left and a right side. And it's a dome-shaped muscle. So what happens is as we breathe in, the diaphragm flattens, which allows air to come into the lungs. And as we breathe out, the diaphragm goes back to that dome-like shape. And so not only is the diaphragm, a huge muscle and a major player in breath, it's also a major player in our core stability, which is really just pressure, being able to maintain pressure between your diaphragm and your pelvic floor. So the functioning of the diaphragm and the pelvic floor, the positioning of that rib cage compared to the pelvis, are all important components of being able to maintain core stability. The function of your diaphragm is a huge component of that, as well as having a functional breath. So a lot of us have actually developed very dysfunctional breaths. So for example, if you find yourself chest breathing, that's a lot of extension of the spine. So if I am only breathing from my chest, and this is what is expanding, that's extension, hyperextension of my spine. That's also a lot of neck action, a lot of muscles that should not be doing the bulk of the work for respiration, kicking in and taking over. So the first thing I want you to do is just take a few breaths in and out through your nose and see if you can feel where your breath is naturally going. So for me, because I've worked on it a lot, it's expanding my rib cage, but that's not where it started, right? I did a lot of belly breathing before. So I want you to figure out what that is for you. So take just a few deep breaths. You can be in a comfortable position, you can be seated, you can be laying on your mat, and just see where your tendency for your breath is currently. After you've done that, just pay attention to that, because that's going to be your default until you kind of change that pattern. So I want you to get in a comfortable position again. That could be seated, right? You could be just seated. You could be laying on your belly. Give yourself a pillow and lay it right under your belly to give yourself some feedback. You can just rest your head on your hands and take some super deep breaths and see if you can get that breath into your back, the back ribs, the side ribs. And as you exhale, you're gonna have your rib cage move down towards your pelvis, almost like a mini crunch. So that is one option. You can grab a pillow, you can lay on it, and why this is helpful is because it kind of blocks off your belly and it gives you a little bit of feedback as to where your breath, we want to direct our breath to our back. And so when I say breathe in and let this expand, if you put your hands on your rib cage, you should feel those hands move away from each other as you inhale and move back towards each other and even down a little bit as you exhale. Because we want that rib cage to come back in and it's gonna move down towards your pelvis, almost like a mini crunch. So you just working on your breath is also you working on your core muscles, actually. And so a lot of times it's hard to get just that feeling of that rib cage expanding because a lot of the muscles around there are tight, especially around our thoracic spine, our scapula, our chest. And so it's okay if you can't get it at first, but the more you work on it, the more you'll be able to get breath into that space. So pick a position. You could be laying on your back or on your belly with a pillow. You could even lay on your back and then put your hands around your rib cage to give yourself a little bit of feedback there. So again, comfortable position. Breathe in through your nose. See if you can get that breath to expand your rib cage. Those hands will move away from each other. As you exhale, rib cage moves down towards your pelvis. So you'll know you got a good exhale because the next inhale will feel easier to expand. And that is the very first thing. That is a very foundational kind of movement practice and principle is where's your breath going? Are we optimizing our diaphragm? Are we optimizing our breath? You can take that and move it in various positions. So you could do it seated. You could come into a cat-cow even kind of position. Press through those hands, even round your spine a little bit. Take some deep breaths in through your nose. Let your rib cage expand. Out through your nose, rib cage moves towards your pelvis. Or one of my personal favorites is to just kind of come down onto your elbows. Gaze is going to stay in between your hands, and you'll take a few breaths through here. So press into your forearms. Those scapula, the flat bones on your back, will spread across your back. Breathe in through your nose, rib cage expands, especially that back rib cage and your side ribs. Exhale, rib cage moves towards your pelvis. Keep that reach through the ground. So pick a position where you feel you can best connect to your breath and best practice getting your breath to your rib cage. Letting that rib cage expand fully, 360 degrees, out to the sides, to the back, even a little bit up and under your collarbone. And the more you practice that and the more you pay attention to where your breath is going, the more you're gonna be able to open up everything through your rib cage, through your back, a lot of the things that are probably pretty tight, and it's gonna affect the functioning of your core, the functioning and optimization of that pelvis, that hip complex, all of the things. So I'm gonna link a few other breathing exercises from other people that I think do a really great job of explaining it below that you can check out if you need a little bit more help. But the very first thing is just figuring out where your breath is going and practicing on getting that breath to your rib cage, allowing that rib cage to expand, allowing that rib cage to drop down on that exhale and moving towards your pelvis. So pick which one works best for you. Seated, pillow under your belly, on face down, on your back, hands on your rib cage, in a quadruped position, or even kind of that position on your elbow. So pick one of those, and that's what you're gonna practice for this program.